You probably know that the way science is being done is changing. Open access is a big deal. Is there anyone who feels strongly one way or the other about open access? Do you think it's a good thing?
Yes.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear it. It's certainly a boon for us journalists. And there is also something called Web 2.0, which is the next generation of the web. It started out with everybody having, when we first started, we thought we would be a radio project because satellite radio was a big deal, and Howard Stern had just gone to Sirius. Then YouTube came along, and we thought, oh, we're going to be a YouTube for science. And now the whole emphasis is on online communities. Facebook, MySpace, if you're a professional, LinkedIn, Plaxo. And Talia just got back from Science Online 09, which was the second annual. You notice that everything is having its second annual meeting. This is all so new. It changes all the time. It's the second annual conference for science bloggers. And there she heard the results of a study that found that Facebook was not what scientists want. So we'd love to hear from you about what you would like to see as an online scientific enthusiast community. We are going to change, we're overhauling our website in the next few months to make it into a community so that you can all talk to each other. We're posting jobs mainly in Latin America, where there are a great many jobs and you don't necessarily need to speak Spanish. Another thing that you ought to think about is running for office, if all else. If you have, let me sort of go down the list of science communications jobs. You probably know that journalism is changing immensely. Everybody is trying to figure out, your generation does not, in general, read newspapers, listen to the radio, or watch television. You go to the internet. So the major broadcasters and the major newspapers are all trying to figure out what to do next. How can they attract you to, where do you find your news? Will it be reliable? How can they reach you? And we're part of that. We do feel at Talking Science that blogging and experiments like ours are what's going to change, are going to save science journalism. With very few exceptions, if the newspaper publisher or the broadcaster decides that it's time to cut back, they get rid of, science is the first to go. You probably read recently that before Christmas that CNN got rid of all its science correspondents. I mean, this is in an age when there are all the major international issues, defense, sustainability, climate change, I could go on and on, health, are all science related. And everybody needs to know something about science. So there's less and less getting out there to the public. So I think sites like ours and blogging is going to make a huge difference. So do think about what you could get out there, how you could communicate your passion for your work, and how you could get your passion across to people who wonder what you're doing in the lab counting fruit flies all the time. Let's see, so this journalism, and that's mostly switching to the web. There are films. It's rare. The Sloan Foundation in New York funds screenplays and plays and films about science. But in general, and Alexi will talk more about this, there aren't many scientists who become filmmakers. So think about that also. And then there is, I mentioned running for office because there are two groups that will help you if you have exhausted the job front and are thinking, gee, you know, this administration looks pretty cool, I'd like to get involved. There's something called Research Advocates in Washington that will help you run for office. And Peter, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name, A-G-R-E, who just became head of the AAAS, is very involved with them, and has, he considered actually running in Minnesota in the Senate race that Al Franken has won. And he advises you not necessarily to aim for the Senate right away, but to think about local office. For the women in the room, there is something called the White House Project, which has pledged to train several thousand women to run for office by next year. And they are trying very hard to get Shirley Ann Jackson, the president of Rensselaer Polytech, to run for president. I don't know whether that will happen, but it seems like a good idea. So those are a few things that out there in the landscape right now that you could think about. And I'm going to ask my colleagues to tell you a bit more about how they got into science communications. I'm going to tell you a bit about how they became part of the Talking Science family. We had a grant from the Noyce Foundation to find a young Spanish-speaking Ira Flato. If anybody out there thinks that they're the man or the woman, please come see us. But we started working with 3 young scientists at Rockefeller University because we were partnering with them, and they all had very different ideas about how they wanted to communicate science. And I've got 2 of them here with me tonight. Cindy Casada is a postdoc in infectious disease, and is a photographer and a flamenco dancer, and has actually related all of this to science. And Alexis Gambis on the end is part French and part Venezuelan, and he is founder of the Imagine Science Film Festival. When it gets to be his turn, he'll show you his website. So we started working with Cindy and Alexis on public events like Alexis' film festival, and we have a live show called the Talking Science Cabaret. It's a variety show where we might have a sword swallower, because I did not know there is so much science involved. You have to use saliva. It's water science because you have to lubricate the sword before you put it down your throat. And doctors in the 19th century studied sword swallowers in order to learn how to intubate patients. So they have made their own contribution to the march of medicine. We have had flamenco dancers because flamenco movements imitate simple machines, which in middle school that's what students are studying. Alexis has shown his films. There are an amazing number of scientists, as you probably know, who are also in bands. And we're going to have a spin-off called Rocket Science at Rockefeller for high school students who, in bands, who will be judged on their musicality and the science content of their lyrics. And
that's going to be awesome.
We hope so, thank you. We will include among the judges a celebrity scientist and someone from the music industry, so that the band could become could get a CD. And of course, so we hope you'll all come, and there'll be certainly People's Choice as well. So this gives you an idea of the kinds of things that Talking Science tries to do. Talia Page is our projects manager and web editor, and website editor, and she's in charge of changing everything over to a community. She has a background in online marketing as well as, but she and I are not scientists in any way, shape, or form. We both studied French, and we consider ourselves translators. And we were talking about this earlier today. In my experience, if a scientist knows his or her stuff, she can explain it to you so that you can translate it to the general public. So I truly recommend science communications as a career. I've had a wonderful time, a lot of it funded by the NSF, including 321. And I will now start out by asking Cindy to tell you how she got involved in science communications.